Hi guys, welcome back to 30 Days to Your First Website Design, a Touch Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and today we're going to talk about designing with grids. Now we'll begin as always by taking a quick look at what we're going to cover in this video. Well, we'll start by asking ourselves, what's so great about grids? What are they and where did they come from? Then we'll have a look at the anatomy of a grid before we check out the 960 grid system. Lastly, we'll touch upon baseline grids before, as usual, I set you a little assignment. So what are grids and why do designers rave on about them so much? Well, grid systems have been around for centuries and have been used as the basis for layout since the earliest days of print. They form vertical and horizontal guides within which a layout can be composed. Designers rely on grids to lend structure to their layout. Grids bring order to chaos, and they take a load of the decision making out of your hands, which allows you to get stuck into the creative aspects of designing. Newspaper layouts, be they online or in print, are clear examples of grid usage, but designs based on a grid don't have to always be quite so obvious. The anatomy of a grid is pretty straightforward. The proportions can alter depending on the framework or your personal approach, but the composite elements remain the same. You have margins, which form the space between the container and the content of the grid. Then, of course, we have the columns, which are the vertically running bands within a grid, and the gutters, which are the spaces between them. Then we're left with the rows and the flow lines, which run horizontally across the grid. So those are the bits and bobs which comprise the whole thing. Now, adhering to these guides will help bring order to your design, which helps the flow of your layout, it clarifies relationships between design elements, and strengthens the hierarchy, or the level of importance, attached to individual components. Improperly aligned objects might not sound like a big problem, but they can be subconsciously distracting for the user, making for a less pleasant user experience. Then again, deliberately breaking the boundaries of a grid can bring instant attention to a detail. Now you can design a grid yourself, open up your graphic application, be it Photoshop, Fireworks, Illustrator, whatever, then use the native grid, ruler and guide tools to build a system on which to base your design. But where web design is concerned, it's often easier to grab one of the many available grid frameworks. They more often than not come with a variety of graphic templates, backed up by CSS files for making the transition to the browser straightforward. Now we're going to have a look at the 960 grid system on which we're going to base our corporate website layout. So we'll open up a browser and we'll just go and visit the site straight away, 960.gs, there we go. And you can see here we've got a big old download button, great example of a call to action if ever I saw one, so we'll just click that for the time being so it's downloading. Won't take long. You can see here there's a lot of documentation, a whole load of examples of sites which make use of the 960 grid framework. You'll probably recognize some of them. Then we've got some snippets and examples at the bottom, and some more resources such as tutorials, including a couple by NetTouch here. Now that's finished downloading, so I'm going to show that in my Finder and double click it just to decompress it. Okay, I'll get rid of my browser. So what we have within our file here from the 960 grid system is a load of directories. We have some plugins for apps, we have the code which I was talking about earlier, the CSS and some demos which run that. Then we have these sketch sheets which are brilliant. Now the 960 grid system works on a basis of 960 pixels width, and the various templates come in 12, 16 or 24 column variants. Now we'll just open up the 16 column variant sketch sheet here, and you can see it. You can imagine printing this. You've got the dummy browser area there, and you can just scribble away on them and plan out your web designs. Clearly see here the columns and the gutters laid out for you. But for the time being, we're going to check out the templates. Now, they're catered for pretty much every possible application here. You can see Balsamiq here, which we touched on a couple of videos ago. And we have CorelDRAW, should you use that, Fireworks, Illustrator, Photoshop. Now, we're going to open a Photoshop example now. So I'm just going to open up this 12 column variant and bring it into my window here. It's a very simple file. It's just a background. You can see my layers here. With an additional layer for our 12 column grid. Now I can toggle that to make it visible or invisible depending on what I'm doing. But for the time being, I'm just going to quickly drag in some assets I've prepared just to show you how quickly you can pull together an effective looking layout. I'm just going to bring up my guides here with Control and Command and colon. There we go. Now I'm snapping to my guides as well, which helps me bring everything in line. So I've got a big header there. I'm going to drag in a little subheader there. That goes to the left of the document as well. Oops. Like that. Now let's see, I've got a horizontal rule which I can place somewhere like that. Oops. Let's try this again. Remove that auto select, just shift that over to the left. Okay, now I've got a couple of paragraphs of text which I can drag over at the same time. I prepared these earlier because it was a lot quicker and less boring for you to watch. So we've got those nicely forming two columns there with a gutter in between, you can see, and just 3 blocks of colour to illustrate how versatile the system is, because I've now got 3 columns of equal width as well. Now if I get rid of my guides, bonk, and I get rid of the columns, chunk, you can see I've very quickly pulled together a very neat and clear layout. A good relationship between the columns and everything involved. It's very quick, but we're going to dive further into this when we actually start laying out our design. We're going to use the 960 grid system. So for the time being, we'll jump back into our presentation, because we've talked a lot about the vertical aspects of the grid, such as this, but now we're going to have a look at the horizontal elements, namely the baseline grid. Now the baseline grid is also very useful, particularly in terms of having large bodies of text. Baseline grid, which runs horizontally, is extremely useful. Now conforming to a baseline grid means regulating the line height and the vertical spacing of your text. Regardless of the font size, the line height of all elements must stick to the grid. Now, we have here an example which I mocked up earlier, and which is available in the download files for this video. It comprises paragraphs and headings, various font sizes, but crucially they all share line heights and vertical spacing which fit to the grid, whether it be 20 pixels or 40 pixels. There you can see the line heights illustrated, and here you have the margins. Now you can see by the time the text reaches the bottom of the page, it's still perfectly aligned, which is very easy on the eye. Now you might say, big deal, but here's an example of exactly the same text, exactly the same font sizes, but with headings with slightly different line heights. Now you can see it doesn't match up properly, and suddenly it's a bit irritating to the eye. Okay, it's time for some further reading now. Firstly, I'd like you to check out thegridsystem.org. It has a ton of grid resources and references all in one place. Great site. Secondly, to dive further into using the 960 grid system, have a look at this article on Web Design Tuts. It covers using the 960 grid system from a beginner's perspective. Now, before we jump into the next video, I have an assignment for you, and you might be able to guess what this one is. I want you to download the 960 grid system, open up a template in your application of choice, and practice laying out columns of text and headers. That's all. Okay, that's it for now. Once again, you've been watching 30 Days to Your First Website Design. In our next video, we're going to take a look at the anatomy of a web page. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us here at Tuts Plus, thanks for watching.